Welcome to Girl in the Gov, the podcast,
where our goal is to make politics more accessible and less intimidating.
The show features an interview with an expert in the political field, walking us through the many cues we have about politics, civics, government, and more.
By providing civic education in the places we are, on our phones, and in the language we speak. And yes, we know we say like a lot.
It's kind of the point, because politics needed a rebrand. Alrighty, welcome back to Girl in the Gov, the podcast, the 100th episode. Samantha.
Wowee! I would
snap.
snap, but it's literally so humid here that my hands are clammier than I don't have a good comparison, but there is no snap coming off of them. No friction. Like I am, guys, like for y'all not watching on YouTube, I am drenched. I told Maddie, I was like, I need to just go on like a little walk around the corner to like just get a little brain refresh before we hop on and record this part, like our intro. And I knew it was warm up. I did not know it was a sauna, a literal sauna. I'm drenched. I look like I jumped in a pool, but like kind of in a cute way. Like it looks silky.
I guess that was me this morning. I did hot yoga and I was literally soaked. The amount I sweat in those classes is so obscene. But anyways, back to our 100th episode. Happy 100th, Samantha. We have come so far. We really have. And this is also, at the end of September, will be our 2-year celebration anniversary of this podcast. Wild.
Because it's so funny. Like in one sense, it feels like 2 years. In another sense, it totally doesn't. And I don't know how to wrap my mind around it.
No, it's
like,
insane.
We were in the heat of the pandemic, lockdown starting it. Like it's so funny because there's also so many like different ways to look at growth and change and evolution throughout the brand from before, from even like 2 months ago, 4 months ago, whatever it is. Time is an illusion and we're not numbers girls. So I can't, that's how I'm rationalizing not being able to get around 100.
But we've made it this far. And if you know anything about podcasting, you know, everyone knows like everyone can start a podcast. And like there's probably multiple people you know that have. But the thing with podcasting is a lot of people don't stick with it. They kind of just fizzle. And the fact that we made it to 100 episodes is an accomplishment, and we couldn't do it without you all listening. So thank you.
Yeah.
We really appreciate all of you, for reals.
Mucho thank you. Especially like everyone that has shared the pod, posted about the pod, been, listening in and sending us questions and just being, generally good. I hate that we have landed on this term, but the govers, I don't know. We're still working on it.
We're
guys.
Workshopping that still.
It hasn't
set in stone.
We've had a lot of evolutions, but our phrase for ourselves really still has not.
Yeah,
evolved.
We need to figure something out there. But
taking
nonetheless, if you also
from the
notice,
helpline,
we have some things in the hopper for the celebration of 100 episodes. And honestly, I also just want to make one note. And the fact that I just said in the hopper just shows that I am 100 episodes in with Samantha Cantor, because that is never, ever, ever, ever something I've ever said before I started this podcast. So I just wanted to highlight that. Because, wow.
I have officially made it as an influencer. Clearly.
Yeah.
I've influenced. It's fun.
100%. But no, we have a few things, like I said, that we are doing to celebrate. One thing that you might have noticed is new intro. So hope you guys like that. We graduated from that, but something I was telling Sam yesterday when we were recording, and I was like, honestly, it's really impressive that our intro, as many flaws as it did have, like made it this far. And you guys, like, it's just crazy too to think about when we recorded that. We literally barely knew each other. We had never podcasted before. We were like making our intro. We're like, how do we do an intro? What's a podcast? And it made it 100 episodes in. So kudos to her. We love her. We're proud of her for making it this far. But we also made a special intro for the Top Stories episode, which was released yesterday. So if you didn't catch that episode, go head over there after this to listen to the new intro there, but also listen to the Top Stories, where we talk about the Trump FBI updates. Do you also like how I put Trump X FBI, the collab?
It's the remix. It's the mashup FBI of the century.
Yes.
So cute. So cute. It's
Student debt
launching.
relief. Yeah, student debt relief and the GOP losing this red wave they've been talking about. So we talk all about all of that in the top stories from yesterday and the new intros in there. There's a few other one other little production moment that's added in there that you have to go listen to hear.
That is true. And I do have an asterisk to that, aka just an add-on, is part of the reason that we also did a little change up on these intros is we wanted to be really clear from the jump as to what each type of episode was about. So if you're sharing an episode with a friend, say it's our interview from this past week with Gabe Roth, and you're like, okay, my friends never listened to Girl in the Gov. They're, I gave them like a one-liner on it, but they don't really know. They, in listening to the episode, will also get the 4-on-1 on like what the show's about, how it's organized, etc.
Totally.
And we just want to make it really clear and easy for you guys for when you share those episodes. Hey,
well,
this
you know
is what it is. Bada bing, bada boom.
Another thing that we've done in celebration of this 100th episode is even expand on that clarification when you do share Girl in the Gov with your friends. And that is our new trailer / basics episode / introduction episode. We are adding a trailer into our podcast page. So exactly what Sam said, if they head right to an episode, they'll have a little explainer in the intro. But if they want even more on us, then we are actually releasing a trailer with a ton of things in it, actually. So buckle up here for a second. We'll explain it. But basically, we're releasing this trailer episode. It will be pinned on our podcast pages so that it's at the top. And for any new listeners, they will head there and be able to learn more about what Girl in the Gov is, what we do, what the podcast is, our founding story, Sam and I's backgrounds. And so again, when, your friends are like, why the fuck are you so obsessed with this Girl in the Gov brand? You can send them this and they'll get the whole spiel, and they'll be hooked too. So that's what's going on there. But there's also another piece of that trailer that we are adding in that includes some political learning.
Facts, because we are integrating a glossary. So one of the, I would say founding pillars, for lack of a term that's not corporate jargon, about Girl in the Gov is trying to make all of the terms that we hear in politics easier to understand. And when we mean easier to understand, obviously we can't change the actual term, but what we can do is provide definitions and background on those terms that actually make sense to us, spoken in our language, as we always say.
Wait, Samantha, I think that the entire Girl in the Gov brand was built on the foundation of the question, what is gerrymandering?
It really is.
That is literally going to be the first question in our audio glossary in our trailer. Mm-hmm. So, sorry, keep going.
For that reference, Maddie is making fun of me because in genuinely every type of pitch meeting we have, and we're explaining the premise for our brand, I always use gerrymandering as the example.
Anyways, back to this audio glossary. Right now, we're going to have, I think we're a little over 10 words. Terms that we are defining in this audio glossary. We're going to continue to add to it. So if you guys have any suggestions of any definitions you want to see put in there, whether it's been in an episode or not, we can record also definitions on our own or use old explainers from guests. But we want to continue to add to this glossary to make it as helpful for everybody as possible. There'll be timestamps so you can just easily scan over and go listen to the definition you want to hear. And same thing, if you have friends who are like, I've never known what that means, who maybe haven't heard of Girl in the Gov, it's a great thing to share to hopefully get them, on the train of getting their political learning started. So it's a great just shareable moment for yourself, for your friends, for your family to continue political learning and get all those definitions that we are expected to know, but we just don't. And it's no one's fault but the government. Fuck them. Anyways, but that is our 100th episode celebration. We got new intros, we got a new trailer, and we're just super excited to continue this journey with you all.
We are. And we are also excited to tell you about an additional venture that we have, as Maddie has said, in the hopper.
In the hopper.
It's out
of the hopper now.
Oh, yeah, it is out of the hopper. The thing that's now out of the hopper is our newsletter called #Viral. It is a paid newsletter, so you have to pay to subscribe, but it is basically social media consulting right to your inbox. So if you are a politico, that means you are an elected official, you're running for office, you're head of an organization in the political space, a PAC, a nonprofit, whatever it is, you somehow work in the political space. Let's just put it that way. And you need help with social media. You need an idea of how to use platforms, right? The basics. You need an idea of the best practices, the trends, the tips and tricks for elevating your platform. And your platform could be, the organization you work for, the elected you work for, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're a staffer, I know we have some staffers that listen. If you know that or have been thinking that your boss, aka the elected you work for, needs some help in the social media department, or they want to kick off their social media accounts on different platforms or whatever it is, then pass along to your comms director, pass along to your press secretary. Yeah. Favorite part of it is the content ideas. Content is really hard to make. It's hard to be a content creator. It's hard to think of new ideas and to also tie it into like what could actually go viral, what could actually get a lot of eyes on it. So we provide fresh content ideas every single week. So you can head to girlonthegov.com/newsletter to learn about it and to also subscribe. So go check it out. But speaking of newsletters, we have one more to plug.
We do. And this is on the career front. It's called The Assist. This newsletter comes out a number of times a week, including a weekend edition. And it is tips and tricks on all things workplace, from work-life balance, how to negotiate a raise, different trends to look out for in terms of corporate hiring and just jobs in general. This is your go-to newsletter for advice on that front. It is super digestible. It's super easy to read. We're obsessed. We are avid readers of this newsletter, obviously. So if you want to join us in reading this newsletter, aka The Assist, you can check out the link in our description here, but it is theassist.com. And when you go and sign up for this newsletter, and of course share it with your friends as well to sign up, you can say that you found the newsletter via Girl on the Gov, the podcast. So make sure you toggle down and click on yours truly, aka us. Okay.
AKA us. Go check them out. Linked in our episode description. But let's finally get into introducing our guests, because we actually have a double header today. That's why the episode's a little long, but it's a good one and a very, very important one. So, Samantha, will you do the honors?
Absolutely. Both of these interviews gave me so much serotonin, I can't even begin to tell you, and so much just genuine hope for the future. I genuinely am so excited. We are talking about ballot measures today, and we are talking from two different state ballot measure perspectives. We're talking from Arizona. We're also talking from Michigan.
Yes, I will also say too that we, especially when Roe was overturned, we had a lot of people curious about this ballot measure process. So this has been a conversation on TikTok. A lot of people have been curious how to implement things like this in their state. So this is a great episode for you to learn about that process and who to reach out to if you are trying to make some change in your state.
Totally. And like we said, this is a double header episode. So we start off with Kelly Hall from the Fairness Project talking about the ballot measure process in Michigan as it relates to reproductive rights. There will be a ballot measure on, well, you guessed it, the ballot this November. So we talk about the process of getting there, what that's looked like, and of course, what needs to happen in November to get that over the finish line. Second to that, we also talk about this ballot measure process from the perspective of Arizonans. From Arizonans for Reproductive Freedom, we have Amy Fitch Heacock, and we go all in on what became this really crazy last-minute process to try and get a ballot measure on the ballot for Arizonans. It didn't actually get on the ballot, which is obviously a bummer, but this episode is super important because there's so much more work to be done ahead of 2024. So especially if you're from Arizona, you're going to want to listen to this conversation, because this is kind of an instruction manual for what needs to happen next. And also a huge congratulations for the amazing work that they did in such a little amount of time to make this magic happen. Oh my God, I had chills. So without further ado, here is Kelly and here is Amy. All right, well, we have a lot to talk about today. Because you're the executive director of the Fairness Project, and we are going to go 10 ways to Sunday about what you guys do and one of the specific campaigns you guys have been working on. But before we do that, we want to get the 4-on-1. What's the overarching theme that you guys work with? What do you guys do? What happens at the Fairness Project?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I love this question. We could spend the whole time talking about this. So the Fairness Project exists to run ballot measures that support working families. So ballot measures enable people to pass laws directly themselves without going through politicians, without waiting for our elected officials to do the right thing. And so the Fairness Project works with advocates and leaders on the ground in states and cities around the country to make sure that when they put an issue that's really important to them in front of voters, that it wins. So we help soup to nuts on things like, how do you draft a ballot measure that is going to win? What polling do you need to have in order for it to succeed? What does it take to run a winning campaign? And so we are the fairy godmothers of ballot measures, coming in to help folks who have the vision, who know what their community needs, who are fed up with politics as usual, to actually come in and get it done.
That's awesome. I love that. You guys have won 24 ballot measures. Is that correct? Can you tell us about some of those?
Sure. So we've been around since 2015, and we started out as an organization that primarily supported ballot measures to raise the minimum wage. The minimum wage has been stuck at the federal level for decades. It is like not even $8 in most states and cities around the country. So when you put the question to voters, do you want to raise the minimum wage? It is really popular, but it takes a lot of effort to get that question on the ballot, to make sure you have a winning campaign. So we have worked on a whole bunch of ballot measures in everywhere from Arizona to Missouri to Maine to raise the minimum wage. And the other big issues that we've worked on have been expanding Medicaid. There's an option for states to expand Medicaid and cover more people with health insurance with almost entirely federal dollars. And it has just been stuck with partisan ideological politics. And so even in deep red states or places that people think are really conservative, like Idaho and Oklahoma and Nebraska, we've been able to put that question directly to voters and expand Medicaid in 6 states already. So we've worked on wages, we've worked on healthcare, we work on ending predatory payday lending and expanding benefits for people. And this cycle, we're also expanding into making sure that we protect reproductive rights. And so as we look at that nexus of politics, of healthcare, of really what are the bread and butter issues that are shaping what people need for their families, those are the issues that we try to bring forward and say, this can't be stuck in political back and forth anymore. Let's just get it done straight at the ballot.
Yeah,
totally. Political ping pong is one of those games. There's never like a set end time. There's never a certain amount of sets. It's like we're just playing all day, all night, all year. But you guys clearly get stuff done. And I'm really curious, like, is there a secret sauce that you guys work with? I mean, obviously not the really crazy pink sauce that's gone viral and it might be poisonous on TikTok. But, what's in the strategy here that makes these ballot measures actually get across the finish line?
So I think there's a few elements of the secret sauce, and it's not that secret. I wish more people would pick up the recipe and do it. It is, first, there are picking issues that are really common sense issues that are broadly popular. And a lot of these issues that affect working families, where you can go, okay, you might have different views about how you want to reshape the broad structure of our country, but we can all agree that wages need to be higher. We can all agree that low income working families deserve health care. So one, picking issues that are simple and straightforward is a big part of it, and not writing off the middle of the country and saying, it doesn't matter who you're voting for president. Oklahomans want more healthcare. Missourians want higher wages. And so we have really focused on expanding the map where progressives can operate, because if we can win with over 60% of the vote on an issue in Idaho or in Oklahoma or in South Dakota, you go like, all right, what else is possible here? How do we make sure that we're not just sticking to the coasts or just sticking to what people have labeled as blue or red. And I think the last ingredient in the secret sauce is remembering that these issues themselves are not inherently partisan. And if we're going to win in those states, we really need to make sure that we're saying, you don't have to set down your whole identity of being a Republican or being a Trump voter or whatever else in order to vote yes on this issue. You can have your opinion about gun control, whatever it may be, but have a different opinion about minimum wage or a different opinion about reproductive rights. And I think that that enables us to really have broader, more expansive conversations with people who might vote for Trump for whatever reasons they do, but also want their grandkids to have access to healthcare. And so that, I think, constructing campaigns that help people take their like party affiliation off and are able to make real progress in these states, even while other people are having partisan battles, that really feels like the fundamental element.
Totally. I think that's so important, that like simplifying part of it that I think so many people struggle with just with politics in general, because it's like even when you go to vote for a candidate, you're voting for a long list of issues and policy stances that you may like some might resonate, some might not, and sometimes you just have to like pick. That's why everyone's like the lesser of two evils or whatever it is, you know? But it's also funny because I feel like Sam and I keep talking about too, like even when you get to Congress, how they push through these huge legislative packages that have all these different issues packed into them. And it's like they don't always work or get passed. And it's like, well, because there's so much going on. It's like, how can we simplify that process perhaps there as well? But ballot measures are such a perfect way to do that, especially for the individual voter, which we love to see. But to understand how this process works a little bit better, can we get into our I Have a Stupid Question segment? Because can you explain what is a ballot measure?
Sure. No stupid questions when it comes to ballot measures. I feel like we've all been failed by the public education system when it comes to civics education. So totally. Ballot measures are a way for people to directly pass laws or constitutional amendments in their states without the involvement of politicians. So the basics are a group of concerned, interested, motivated, activated citizens comes together and drafts the law or the constitutional amendment they want to see. They collect enough signatures from their fellow voters in their state, all of whom are signing a petition to say, I want the opportunity to vote on this. Mm-hmm. If they collect enough signatures, that direct question goes on the ballot for the entire electorate of that city or state to vote on. And if they pass it, if more people vote yes than no, then that directly becomes law or gets written directly into the constitution of the state. Now, there's plenty of other steps in there. There's a lot of money spent on a big yes or no campaign, vote yes on Proposition X or vote no on Proposition Y, just like you would see candidates campaigning over who people should vote for. But the fundamental basics are on issues where you can really boil it down into a simple single topic. You can put these issues directly in front of voters. And I will say, not every state in our country has this option. Only 23 states around the country can you do it at the statewide level, but lots and lots and lots of additional cities, municipalities, counties can pass ballot measures too. So no matter where you live, it's worth thinking about, is a ballot measure part of the strategy you want to advance on the issues that you care about?
Mm-hmm. I have another question that your answer just totally sprung up in my head.
Great.
In terms of the groups, organizations, entities behind promoting specific ballot measures, who are those groups? Like, I feel like from time to time, whenever one has popped up, I've seen, like you said, like lots of signs, kind of, like campaign signs that you see for a candidate. And oftentimes when you go to Google, like what the side is, either side, the yes or the no, it's really confusing and you can't quite figure out like where the information is coming from. And so I'm just curious, I know each issue might have different groups involved, but like largely, who are the players in this?
So I think, unfortunately, your instinct that it really varies by issue is right. So there's no one answer here. I will say that the campaigns that I trust and the ones that we are involved in are really transparent about who's behind them. So it is, you know, a badge of honor to have a large, diverse coalition of local and national organizations all aligning behind one ballot measure. So on a Medicaid expansion ballot measure, which is a huge healthcare issue, but also a big economic issue, these campaigns have had everybody from the American Cancer Society to AARP, to the leading hospitals, the Chamber of Commerce, leading grassroots organizations. We're working on a campaign right now on Medicaid expansion in South Dakota that has the endorsements of dozens of Native American tribes, as well as these other stakeholders. And all of those folks are really proud to put their names, their logos, their information on the websites of those campaigns. Where it starts to get a little bit dicier and where you can read between the lines is when you can't figure out who is behind the ballot measure. And the answer is probably that it is somebody who's really invested in the status quo, whether that's the ideological status quo or corporate funders who are, against raising the minimum wage or against expanding healthcare for their own sort of, I'm already at the top of the heap and I'm not interested in change kind of motivations. But I think for those campaigns that we are really proud to be affiliated with, you can go see on their websites, here's all the folks who are endorsing it. Here's all the folks from around the corners of the state, because ballot measures, when they're done well, should be a really vibrant expression of an issue whose time has come, that's broadly popular in the state. It's gotten stuck in the state legislature, and people are like pretty proud to say we're doing this for ourselves.
Yeah,
totally. No, that makes a lot of sense. Especially, I remember I guess it was last fall, I was in Maine, and I don't remember exactly what the ballot measure was. I can't remember. It was something with either waters, highways, something along those lines, infrastructure in general and spending. And I remember looking stuff up and being like, can't figure it out. Obviously, I know if I can't, well, not obviously, but I'm like, okay, there's something shady here, but I'm not quite sure and whatnot. So I was curious, but nonetheless, we do want to talk about another distinction. And that is ballot measure versus proposition, which is definitely Maddie's territory because California and propositions, my God, you guys have so many. I can't keep up. What's the difference?
This is just a terminology difference. And every state or jurisdiction uses a different term. It is confusing unnecessarily, but ballot measure is a really good catch-all term. Sometimes they're called ballot initiatives. Sometimes they're called ballot propositions or just propositions. Sometimes we refer to them as amendments because we are amending the state constitution. So I would say don't let the vocabulary dissuade you. If folks are able to collect signatures and put it on the ballot themselves, that's a ballot measure, a ballot initiative, call it whatever you want to. And there are some instances where legislatures themselves can refer a core question to voters. They want to sort of punt the ball, and those things get called ballot measures as well. So when you're looking at a question that's an actual, voters get to make the law, they get to have the final say on their ballot, in the voting booth, that's a ballot measure as far as we're concerned.
Got it. You kind of touched on this earlier, but the whole partisanship of these ballot measures and how, oftentimes it's a good way to kind of take the party loyalty out of some of these issues to get them implemented. Can you kind of explain whether ballot measures are typically partisan or nonpartisan? And also, do we see ballot measures where there are kind of either of the two big establishment parties behind them? Can you kind of paint that picture as well of where the parties come in and if they do?
Sure. So ballot measures are not formally partisan. There's no need to register a ballot measure with a political party. There's no partisan primaries for ballot measures. And typically, the state parties or the national political parties don't play a particularly huge role in ballot measures generally. So on the whole, the answer is these things are not partisan. And as I said before, especially when we're working in red and purple states, we need to have a cross-partisan coalition to get enough voters to come together to advance something. There are not enough Democrats in Idaho to just pass, Medicaid expansion on its own. So it's really a strength of ballot measures, I think, that they're nonpartisan. Now, that said, a lot of the issues that we work on are affiliated macroscopically with one party or the other. And I don't think we can deny that that's true. And then it becomes part of the strategy of a ballot measure campaign. Do you lean into that and say, look, abortion rights are deeply under attack. It's time to come out and protect them. And everybody from, Elizabeth Warren on down should come out and be a part of this campaign, no matter where it is. Or do you say to folks in other jurisdictions, this is not about the party. You do not need to declare yourself a Democrat in order to care about this particular issue. And I think that really depends a lot on where the campaign is being run, what the issue is, what the environment is. And that's, part of the overall strategy. But the short answer would have been, no, these are not partisan.
Well, I'm curious what you guys have found in some of your strategies. What does help? Do some big name endorsements help push things over the finish line? Or because you're trying to appeal to people from a range of the spectrum, is it better to not include those big political names to then ultimately make it political and steer some people away who might actually hop on board? Have you guys found either way is the better strategy?
I think that in the vast majority of the places we work, the things that are most helpful are odd bedfellows in the same coalition. So when you have, two campaign co-chairs, and I'm going to use our Idaho Medicaid expansion campaign as an example. One of the co-chairs of that campaign was from an organization called Reclaim Idaho, an amazing grassroots affiliated organization. And the other was a former legislator, deep conservative Republican, owned a gun shop, had an NRA bumper sticker on the back of her car. And both of those folks were the co-chairs of this Medicaid expansion campaign because they could agree on that. And I think that having endorsements from folks that people don't expect, like major business leaders, or in the case of, minimum wage, small business owners, those things really matter. I think it's this must truly be a common sense solution, a middle ground solution. If we've got folks on both ends or from weird parts of the political spectrum coming together, I don't think it surprises anyone when major progressive celebrities come out in favor of some of these things that are, progressive priorities. So I love to find those odd connections because that helps us reach a different kind of voter.
Totally.
So I think that's the most important piece.
Interesting.
I love that. I love the odd couple.
It's
fairly odd parents, fairly odd couples here. I mean, we know we have a question in Fast Five about fun couples later. So I feel like this is it's setting the stage perfectly.
Perfect.
Which we love. And we also have a question on sort of the smaller, I don't know if micro is really the right word, but just the smaller scale of towns, cities, etc., and ballot measures. Is the process any different at that level in terms of making those happen than at the state level? What does that look like?
Yeah, and also does the policy issues differ on that level as well, versus the state level?
Totally. So the process is pretty similar. Again, the basics are come together around an idea, get your ducks in a row to make sure this is the policy you want, collect enough signatures to put it on the ballot, campaign for people to vote yes, and then enact it on election day. But the issues do really vary, and it sort of goes back to what issues that level of government is responsible for. So we saw some really interesting ballot measures relating to police accountability at the local level in 2020 and 2021. We were involved in one in Cleveland to create a really phenomenal citizen oversight commission that succeeded. That's hard to do at the statewide level because every city governs their own police department.
Right.
We can't expand Medicaid on a city by city basis. And so we don't get to do that, just in Jacksonville, Florida, as opposed to the whole state. So it does vary what issues you can put on the ballot. but there are some that are the same. We've won minimum wage increases at the statewide level, and we've also done it at the municipal level. Just last fall, Tucson, Arizona, voters voted for a $15 minimum wage there, which is going to be higher than the rest of Arizona. So there are some issues that you can take locally or statewide, and it really just depends on the scale of your ambitions, what's possible, and sort of what the issue is.
We got to make a little Venn diagram of like state, local, in the middle, what you can do both. We'll
Wait,
work on
I
that.
miss Venn diagrams.
I know.
And like graphs. Like, I think that was the only part of math class that I liked, was making
I was
graphs.
like, I
Because
get
then I got fun pens and I could color them in. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, we are getting very distracted. I could go down a whole rabbit hole about highlighters and Venn diagrams.
Oh boy.
We want to go over to Michigan.
Great.
And we want to talk about the Reproductive Freedom for All campaign. Obviously, or like eyes on the prize with this one for sure, but we want to fill everyone else in on this. What is this campaign? What are the details? How did we get here? Give us a 4-on-1.
So I think the most exciting ballot initiative, ballot measure in the country this year is in Michigan. It's the Reproductive Freedom for All campaign. And it really is an extraordinary story of how we got here that goes back all the way to 1931, which is Michigan has a law on the books from 1931 that criminalizes the provision of abortions. So that when the Dobbs decision came down, and even before then, folks in Michigan were aware this is the underlying law. If we don't do something, if we don't have a strategy, no matter who the governor is or who's in the state house, this is what we're left with. It could immediately impact the provision of reproductive health care in Michigan. So that was the crisis that folks in Michigan were facing. And they decided to take a multi-pronged approach. Going back to last year, major leaders in the state, Planned Parenthood of Michigan, ACLU, Michigan Voices, which is an incredible grassroots organization, and dozens of other local organizations that care about this issue came together to be like, okay, we're going to file lawsuits. We're going to try to elect the right candidates. We are also going to qualify a constitutional amendment to the Michigan Constitution that proactively protects people's reproductive rights. We can't afford to have any of these strategies fail, but the constitutional amendment is the most durable, permanent way of protecting reproductive health care in Michigan. And so that started off and, multi-million-dollar, tens of thousands of people coming together to collect enough signatures to put that on the ballot. It will be in front of voters this November. And I hope that the vast, vast majority of people in Michigan will vote yes on that constitutional amendment to make sure that it's a permanent right to reproductive health care in Michigan, one that is unaffected by which politicians are elected into the right positions of power in that state.
Yeah.
I have a silly question.
I'm ready.
Well, I don't know if it's silly. It's smaller than the rest. And that is in terms of like the petition process to physically get signatures in person, and you can't do it online. And I'm curious, in Michigan, is it the same way where you have to do it in person? And also, like, if so, is that something that could change? Because I feel like that's super out of date for like a millennial or Gen Z. Like, I don't know. Like, if someone, maybe this is also a New York thing, someone came up to me with a clipboard, I'd be like, are you trying to rob me? Like, are we going to duke it out? Like, that would be my reaction. Or I would just ignore them. And I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just like,
I know.
The culture.
It's a huge barrier. It is a physical, in-person, ink on paper situation. That's true in Michigan. It's true almost everywhere. Even during COVID, there were not really any exceptions to this process. And I will say, you're right that it's out of date. You're right that it's hugely burdensome. The odds are really stacked against advocates who are trying to take this approach to making change. We had to turn in over 750,000 physical signatures in Michigan to put that on the ballot. And that is no small feat. It takes
That's heavy.
It's really heavy. And
there better have been some men carrying those briefcases full of signatures.
Very, very strong women and people of all genders.
Yes, there we go.
I think that your question about, is this going to change? I'm going to take us on a little brief tangent off of your little question, which is, in order for it to change, it would require more people in positions of power who want to make it easier for us to pass ballot measures, not harder. And if you can think about sort of all the reasons why our current political system wants to make it harder to pass ballot measures, not easier, you'll get a sense of my pessimism about whether this thing is actually going to change. Because
Right.
the reality is, politicians, whether they be governors or city councilors or state legislatures, they don't love it when people go around them and pass laws themselves. They're like, we have a stronghold on decision making here. Totally. We have been telling people for years that our voters don't want Medicaid expansion, don't want minimum wage. How dare you come in and prove us wrong? So those politicians, rather than making it easier to collect signatures, are passing laws to make it harder, saying every single sheet needs to go to a public notary in addition to you getting it signed. You need to have your entire petition printed on one sheet of paper, which means they're like the size of bath towels. It's like all sorts of weird things to make it harder, including that in a bunch of states, they're trying to change it from passing with just a majority of the vote to needing 60% of the vote to pass ballot measures. And so the trend, unfortunately, is pushing in the other direction of it being harder to get things on the ballot and win rather than easier. And I hope that we can stem that tide, but it is, for now.
What if we make a ballot measure to make it digital?
That is a great solution. And I'm here for it. When you're ready for that, I am here for it.
We can spearhead this initiative. Just let us know. I'm ready.
It's been launched. It's been launched here.
Soft launch. Soft launch. We're in the brainstorming process, but we will start this for sure. You mentioned too in Michigan how many signatures you guys got. Can you kind of paint the picture of like the organizing efforts around this and how Michigan just absolutely shot out of the water?
Yeah, this is a story that is really the story of grassroots organizing and the groups on the ground. This is, there's a lot of things as a national organization that we at the Fairness Project can help with. Actually being there physically, manning tables at farmers markets and going door to door and, really doing the yeoman's work of collecting signatures is the story of tens of thousands of Michiganders who should be incredibly proud. Totally. So it takes a gajillion clipboards, a lot of training people to be able to talk to voters who think that they're getting mugged and are actually not getting mugged, to say like, no, this is a ballot measure that does this. Here's who supports it. I'm not asking you for money. I'm just asking you for your signature. And then somebody has to go through all of those and make sure, is this person really a registered voter? Have they signed the right address on their form? So in addition to collecting all those signatures, and over a third of those signatures were collected by unpaid volunteers in every single corner of the state. Also, somebody has to sift through them, put them all in boxes, turn them all in. So it is a really big operation that folks, it's hard to overstate what a big deal it is and how important it's been for people to have a place to channel their outrage about what's been happening at the Supreme Court level, to really get out there and say, we're taking this back into our own hands. We're doing it for ourselves. And I think that is what has powered all of those folks in Michigan who came together to do that.
Yeah. To kind of understand too a little bit more about this process, the thing is too, when everything was coming out about Michigan and the success there, we made some TikToks. We had a lot of people be commenting, being like, how can I do this in my state? Do you have any advice, or just for people who, not only for, reproductive freedom, but for any issue they're looking to possibly get on the ballot? Like, what does that process really look like? Like, are there organizations that can spearhead this and like write these ballot measures? Can you just walk us through from like this idea of, I want to get this on the ballot, like if you are especially maybe just like a regular citizen, like how do you go about doing that?
Sure. So one, come to us at the Fairness Project. We are happy to help. And none of this really happens just from a single person alone. It is a huge team effort. And so I think the most successful ballot measures have a really strong combination in their early days of people who are really motivated, whether they're individual citizens or organizations, and know their locality, the politics of their space really well. And also people who have done this before, whether it's on that issue or in that jurisdiction, who know where all of these like booby traps and speed bumps are buried. Because as I said before, it's not an easy process to navigate. So I would say,
for sure,
if you are motivated to get an issue on the ballot, look around and go, okay, who are the organizations? Is it the local Planned Parenthood in your area? Is it the local ACLU? Is it grassroots organizers who have been, labor unions who have been fighting for a higher minimum wage? And figure out who is the right little
who's already like doing the work. Yeah.
Who's doing the work and go like, okay, have we thought about a ballot measure? Are we done banging our head against the wall of the city council or the state legislature? And then give us a shout, because it is truly it's a long process. We are already starting right now on things that will go in front of voters in 2024, because it takes a long time to go, all right, get the lawyers together and draft a thing, figure out what's possible, what ballot language will be most popular with voters, who's going to come together around funding this thing. I wish that it was possible to just say, with sheer, elbow grease and willpower, it's possible to get this constitutional amendment passed. It usually takes a lot of people and a lot of money to get it done. And so that work starts really early. And I think having a combination of national and state organizations coming together is usually what gets it over the finish line. And I think there are some really powerful stories of how we can work together to make sure that everybody is playing to their greatest strength. As I said before, in Oakland, California, where I live, I cannot be out there collecting signatures in Ann Arbor, Michigan to put it on the ballot. They've got to do that directly themselves. That's their greatest strength. Us figuring out, okay, what's all the legalese that needs to happen? What's this campaign strategy and the polling and the budget for this thing going to look like? Really coming together around, who can best do what, I think can start really early, and it's never too early to start thinking about it.
Totally. Can you run us through some ballot measures or propositions that are on ballots this year that like you think should be highlighted, that across different states, we have people from all over the place, like what are some of the ones you're really watching?
Absolutely. So we've talked about Michigan reproductive freedom for all. Super jazzed about that one. There's also another proactive protect reproductive freedom ballot initiative in Vermont that will be on the ballot, and California. So of course, Vermont and California, a little bit less on the front lines of whether reproductive rights are going to be stripped away immediately, but still really important that people in those states vote yes and send a really definitive signal that this is what the electorate wants. So those are the three proactive ones on repro rights that I think are incredibly important. We're going to expand Medicaid to 42,000 people in South Dakota this year. South Dakota will be the 7th state that has taken up that option to do Medicaid expansion through a ballot measure, and that's pretty exciting. Voters in Nevada and Nebraska will be voting on higher minimum wages, so that is a big deal. We would love to see people get a raise at the ballot box. And there's a lot of exciting things, some good, some not so good in Arizona on the ballot box. It's going to be a long ballot in Arizona. But one of the things that's exciting there is an effort to protect people from predatory medical debt. 1 in 3 Arizonans is in debt collection right now. This helps people by lowering interest rates, protecting more of their assets from bankruptcy and debt collection. Really helps to interrupt the cycle of poverty that so many people get sucked into. And so very excited about that initiative in Arizona. So there are others that we're excited to have a full slate of things that are a diversity of issues and a diversity of states that we're working in, but those are some highlights.
Are there any sneak peeks for 2024?
I don't think that Michigan is going to be the last place we see advocates using a proactive strategy to put reproductive freedom on the ballot. I think where and in what form is still, there's a lot of work to do, but I think that that's one that you're going to see come up again in 2024. And the more that people are feeling frustrated about a particular issue and the lack of action at the federal or state level, the more likely it is to come to the ballot. So
Yeah.
I would say think about the things that people are most amped about. It is, of course, reproductive freedom is up there, but we could see gun control measures come to the ballot box. We could see, things related to climate change. We could see things really related to wages and economic inequality. I personally hope that some of the things that were in the federal Build Back Better package that is not getting done at the federal level are going to come to ballot boxes near you. Paid family medical leave, we have seen pass at the ballot box. I have a pretty strong suspicion that some of those will materialize.
Love that. I'm excited about that for sure. Well, I hope everyone is super excited about just the learning about this process and how direct democracy is an option. And if you are interested in seeing something get done, head to the Fairness Project. Where can people find you guys?
We're at thefairnessproject.org and on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everywhere, the internet permeates. We are. So thefairnessproject.org and from there.
Yes.
All the places. We love to see it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, chatting with us, giving us the 4-on-1 on this very important topic. And we're going to have to, get back to this conversation 2023 and 2024 because this process isn't over. Ever.
Never over, just more good work to do out there than can ever really be done. So we're privileged and proud to be part of it. And thanks so much for having me.
Yes, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Okay, well, we are super excited to have you not just on our IG Live, but for a full episode because we need to get into all things Arizona, specifically reproductive freedom wise. There is lots to talk about. We need a full episode for this. Let's just put it very clearly. But we do want to give everyone that didn't get to tune into the IG Live yet a little bit of background. You work for Arizonans for Reproductive Freedom. Can you give us a background as to what you guys do, how you got into this space? How do all these things sort of come together?
Yeah, absolutely. So Arizonans for Reproductive Freedom is a political action coalition. We were formed really within a couple of days after we got the Alito leak from the Supreme Court, where we had a pretty good feeling that Roe was going to be overturned in the Dobbs decision. And so we are a group of people who are past and present reproductive advocates. We have activists. We have experienced field organizers who have worked to campaign. We have abortion providers and those organizations, as well as, attorneys and policymakers, and then just concerned citizens as well who wanted to join in and have their voice be heard and help us get this off the ground.
Totally. That's amazing. Well, how did you get into the political space, and not only the political space, which is a monster of its own, but specifically this fight for reproductive freedom? What is your journey here?
Yeah. So I have an education background in political science and public policy. I went here to the University of Arizona and started out in politics, burned out very quickly, as one does, because it can be very hard. Yeah. Especially, I think I was in my very early 20s and really just trying to find myself still. And then in the midst of that space where there was so much pressure, it was really difficult to keep the ground underneath my feet, I think. So I did that for a number of years and then left. However, I always stayed in the background working on campaigns, helping with different caucusing, depending on the state that I was living in, ballot initiatives, all of that sort of stuff. I always tried to stay involved in field work. And then I have always been a reproductive advocate. It's something that I feel very strongly about. And about a year ago, we had, right around the time that we knew SB 8 was going to be enacted in Texas, which of course is their 6-week abortion ban, which is now obviously expanded. The Women's March National Organization was looking for volunteers in cities to take on some of the grassroots organizing. And I thought, well, this is something I feel good about. I have experience in, so I'm going to go ahead and throw my hat in and volunteer to do this in Tucson. And as it turned out, Tucson is this beautiful, rare gem. We're like a blue dot in our purple. And so I was able to really quickly organize on behalf of Women's March and create not just protests, but also rallies and informational community events so that I could get reproductive rights and reproductive resources out in front of people in our community. And then beyond that, also looking at the feminist agenda, which is very intersectional. There are all of these issues that come together, and reproductive freedom is just one of them. So in my work, that I had been very successful in that volunteerism, and again, still working with some candidates and doing some low-level political work. And then when we got the leak, some friends of mine who are also part of the coalition said, hey, we're trying to identify all of our stakeholders, and we think that Amy should be in the room on this as well. And so really, it was just this beautiful way that our coalition came together, where we did a really good job of figuring out who the community stakeholders would be. And so obviously I jumped in right away, because the option to do nothing just never even occurred to me.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Totally. And wow, we're jinx. I will see you at the soda fountain later. Thank you. That aside, this whole thing like coming together is such like a cool story, and obviously it's amazing. We need more and more of it. But for us, like when the leak happened and we're just sort of figuring out, okay, like what are the action items? Like how do we get people to organize? How can they pitch in? And this came on our radar as well as an option. These constitutional amendments are a really great way of protecting, enshrining rights. And I'm curious for you guys how this kind of came onto your guys' radar as something you could take on, and something that, could be, really put in front of voters. I know like it's a race to get enough signatures, but, from your guys' end, how you guys be like, okay, we're going to do this, and this is the strategy we're going to use. What was that process like?
Yeah. So really early on, we had to identify what Arizona state politics looks like. And although we are a purpling state and Tucson is very blue, and our major counties are too, Maricopa County also is overwhelmingly blue now, despite what our polling might look like from the outside. The day-to-day is much different. And so what we really wanted to keep in mind is that we have tried statutory initiatives in the state of Arizona before. Most famously, we had one that was surrounding education. Arizona, as you may have heard, has a voucher expansion. So people can use tax dollars for private schools, which we're not a fan of, because our public schools now are ranked last in the nation. And so we, as people of Arizona, created a ballot initiative to redirect that funding and fully fund our public schools again. And we got it passed. It got on the ballot. We got it passed. It was a beautiful piece of legislation that the people were able to formulate for ourselves. And our state legislature immediately took to challenging it, because our legislature and our governor's office are still Republican led. And so it eventually, because they continued to fight it in court, it was thrown out by our state Supreme Court, which is again very biased. And so we knew that if we went that route, that there would be a higher likelihood that we would face challenges that would ultimately lead to it being thrown out altogether. And we simply didn't want to take that risk. We learned a lesson by watching what happened there. And so that was the first thing. And then Arizona also is a state, I think there's 18 states where the people can bring about a constitutional amendment. And we had this beautiful window of time. We had about 6 weeks where we thought, well, it's 356,000 signatures, but maybe we could pull this off. And so we went for the strongest form of legislation we could get in that period of time. And that's really how the amendment was born. It was just a lot of calculating to determine how we could protect reproductive freedom the best way.
Yeah. Well, let's get into like that process of how that gets going and get all of our definitions in order, because we want to start with our I Have a Stupid Question segment and kick it off with just like explaining what really is a petition in terms of like, obviously, like we know what change.org is. Like,
Right.
How does petitions come into play with the government and actually making change in policy?
Sure. So when you have an idea for a piece of legislation, you typically have somebody who can write legalese very well, almost always an attorney, although there are policy writers. And once you get somebody on your team to write a piece of policy, then you take it to your Secretary of State's office and you file it. And then they give you something that looks like this. I'm going to see if you can all see this.
Oh, yeah.
This is actually one of our petitions. And so this is page 1. And then it's essentially there's like a brief up here that tells you what our petition is about. We have to know who's registering it. And then it's all these signatures, 15 signature lines. And you have to go around and get people who are registered voters. In this case, it was statewide, not just in a county. So statewide registered voters had to sign this. And as you can sort of see, these lines are super tiny. Like if it is it's not even as thick as my index finger. And one of the bizarre rules is that you cannot have any part of your signature, your address, your printed name cannot go outside of those lines, or the Secretary of State does not count that as a valid signature.
Oh my God, really?
So
is that an Arizona thing?
It's like I have like a big curly Q, guys.
Yeah, you would be surprised at how much you got.
Really extra signatures, like
exactly.
myself included.
It doesn't make any sense. And Arizona is one of the most strict states, but there are similar pieces or similar rules in other states as well. Arizona just tends to be very, very strict about what kind of signatures they're willing to take.
I've signed a few of those outside of Trader Joe's in California, and I know I'm doing my big signatures. It still counts here.
Yeah, but make sure to ask. I don't know what the California law looks like right now, but sometimes also if somebody has gone way out of the line, then we would just have to skip down a line so that it would not interfere with the next person's. And then again, there's sort of discretion again at the Secretary of State's office about whether or not they'll accept that. So it is really, really challenging.
Also, sorry, I have another question about that. When you're in the process of getting those signatures, obviously you have to get registered voters' signatures. Is there a way that you guys check registration when you do that? Or is it just like you just trust that people are registered and when they say they are?
We just got to trust them. We just have to trust them. Yeah. Ultimately, that job is done by the Secretary of State's office as well. Again, like this happens most often, as you know, if you've signed a petition, it's somebody out in front of a store or at a community event with a clipboard asking for your signature. And there really isn't a resource for us to determine registration at that time. And really, I mean, there were some petitions that we went through where people from South Dakota signed, and that's not a valid signature. But that onus falls on the Secretary of State's office to figure out which signature is valid.
Got it.
Totally.
Sorry.
Especially I can see that being super confusing because like everyone, like you could be from another state and really want to help people in another state and being like, okay, sure, put my John Hancock on this line and it'll help and see where it goes. So I definitely see how that could happen. And wow, some interesting old school processes for sure. Like I would hope that this would be electronic at this point, but we know it's not.
Yeah, we do have.
I feel like a QR code would be great.
Exactly. In Arizona, we do have an equal petition option, but it is not for any sort of ballot initiative. It's only for candidates. So if you're running for office, you can direct somebody and it's actually much more efficient because they log in, they have to register their voter identification. So they'll have a little number at the end of their voter ID card and they put in their address and then they use an electronic signature in order to make sure that a candidate can get on the ballot. There's absolutely no reason in the state of Arizona why we can't have that for ballot initiatives, except that they want to sort of hamper that direct democracy.
Well, that's the perfect segue to our next question, which is literally, what is direct democracy?
Sure. So direct democracy is the process of people getting legislation on the ballot without going through their legislators. So ordinarily, when we, look at laws being made, it's a lot of people who we elected coming up with ideas for what sort of policies they want to see, and then sort of gathering their caucus around them to get them voted into law. But in terms of direct democracy, it is literally people saying, this is what we want to see as a law in our state. This is what we want to see as an amendment to our Constitution and so we are going to lead this charge, and then it falls on us to sort of formulate our own caucus through the gathering of signatures. But it is the most direct way for people to play a part in the legislative process.
Got it.
Makes sense. Okay. Now, this is one that I didn't even realize till last week when I was looking. I was deep in the Secretary of State's website, and I was like, this is a role I haven't heard of before. And that is county recorder. What is that? Who is a county recorder? Need the deeds.
Yeah. So a county recorder is the person who is in charge of taking care of public records for that county. And then also at election time, they are in charge of managing all of the election rules. So in our case, we have in Arizona something called the permanent early voting list. So a lot of us, greater than 80% of us, get our ballots in the mail about a month ahead of the primary. Mine actually just came a few days ago, and our primary is set for August 2nd. And so the ballot will come in the mail, and our recorder is in charge of making sure that that ballot meets all state laws, that it is all of the envelopes are correct in terms of the way that they need to be returned. And then when those are collected, the county recorder's office will also oversee those and make sure that all of those ballots are valid and ready to be counted. And really, we are very lucky in Arizona because by and large, our county recorders are very good at what they do. And sort of infamously, we are, one of the states where some of our crazies tried to challenge the 2020 election. And it was our county recorders who stood up and said, no, we did our jobs. Our election was valid, and they really stood strong. And so the county recorder plays a much more important role than I think all of us realize.
Yeah,
totally. Like, talk about underrated job of the year, month, century. I'm not sure what we're going to measure it by,
a
but like
meticulous
absolutely.
one too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Totally very important. Well, moving on, let's talk about, this petition that an initiative that you guys kickstarted after the Alito opinion was leaked and that you were hoping to get on the ballot this year. Can you kind of explain what happened and what was the amendment and give everybody the kind of quick explainer on that and where it's at now?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we decided that the best way to go about this would be to enshrine reproductive freedom into our Arizona state constitution. And the way that looked for us was to protect everything from contraception through postpartum care so that anybody could make any of those decisions about their own reproductive rights on their own and have all of those decisions between them and their doctor, as opposed to having the state involved at all. The other aspect of that too is that, again, like the United States has a really dark history of forcibly sterilizing some people and groups. And so the other part of the constitutional amendment is simply to say, you can't do that either. Each person and their physician are the only people who have the right to determine if and when they reproduce. And so we formulated that. We got a petition, or got the initiative filed. We got petitions. We went around and we were about a 97% volunteer force on the ground. 3,000 volunteers in Arizona.
Wow.
Carried petitions for us and got signatures. And at the end of the day, I believe that we had about 57 days to collect signatures from the time that we filed to the time that our petitions were printed and we got people on the ground. And in that time, we collected more than 175,000 signatures, which is incredible. It's absolutely unheard of. That pace is crazy. Unfortunately, we needed 356,000 to make the ballot for this November. So although we fell short of that, we were able to get this incredible coalition of Arizonans who are very much committed to making reproductive freedom a matter of our state constitution. We know that we, if given a little bit more time, certainly can get this on the ballot in the future. And so we've decided to point our focus towards 2024 and look to see if there's something we might be able to do in the short term that would possibly restore now abortion rights and all reproductive freedom in the state of Arizona.
Totally. And speaking of 2024 and looking at that benchmark, what needs to be done between like now and then to make sure that happens? And sort of why is 2024 that benchmark?
So 2024 is just our next election year for this cycle. That's just the way our elections work in Arizona. So we would need to start, well, really, we're already starting to continue to build our community outreach, right? So we know that we can do this with volunteers, where our pace was just incredible. And so we are going to continue to reach out to community partners. We're going to continue to grow our coalition and have our communications be such that everybody understands what it is we're trying to do and the frame of time we now have to get this put onto the ballot in 2024. And we will do that from now until November. And then if no other solution presents itself, so assuming that somehow federally we don't get Roe back, or there's some sort of a miracle that happens to protect abortion rights, we will then file again in November after this coming election, which is the next window of opportunity for us to file a ballot initiative for 2024. and we'll just hit the ground running and do it all over again. And I look forward to that because I know that we will definitely get the signatures we need.
Hmm. So you just have to wait till this November election happens,
Yeah.
and then you can start getting petitions for a 2024
Right.
election. That's
Yeah.
wow, nice. Let's talk about like the governor's race too, and how that is going to impact really just reproductive freedom and protecting it. Can you kind of explain that of how this plays a big role in really reaching that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. So the governor has the final say, really, via veto power in the state of Arizona. So if legislatures continue to push for abortion bans, which we know they have, once it gets to the governor's desk, that person can determine whether or not they are going to sign or veto that. And in Arizona, again, Democrats lack 2 seats in the House and 2 seats in our state Senate from being a blue legislature.
Hmm.
So the Republicans would not have the ability to override a veto in the state of Arizona on a piece of legislation that bans abortion. So if we had a Democrat in office as governor right now, we simply would not be looking at the bans that we already have in place. We would still have abortion protection. It is 100% because our governor is a Republican and has continued to say falsely that Arizona is a strictly pro life state, that we are in this position today. And so we do have some excellent candidates, one in particular who's sort of pulling away from the rest right now in the primary, and hopefully change the office and make it a Democratic office this November. And hopefully we can flip the legislature too, because really that's the
Yeah.
quickest means to an end.
Yeah, totally. Wait, sorry, question. So
Sure.
if you were to get the signatures put on the ballot and then the voters pass it, the governor can still veto that?
Not in this case, no. So
Oh, okay.
that would be like the state legislature. Our state legislature has enacted several different types of abortion restrictions over time. In fact, prior to the Dobbs decision, Arizona had some of the most restrictive abortion laws already. We had a 24-hour waiting period. We had an ultrasound mandate. There were the pre-abortion counseling mandate and it didn't matter like what your circumstance was. A 14-year-old kid, really, like this is a real life example. A 14-year-old young woman walked in with her mother. She had been raped by her uncle, and she had to go through that pre-abortion counseling service before she was allowed to have that procedure. And as it turns out, Dobbs overturned Roe and she was not able to have the procedure at all, which again is a
What?
nightmare. And so again, we already had such terrible restrictions. And if we had not had Republican leadership in the governor's office, we wouldn't have been looking at any of that. So
Oh
again,
my
like
gosh.
it's really important that we continue to get out the vote and that we vote blue this November.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. And one role we also want to speak about within here is secretaries of state. I feel like this is definitely one of those underrated roles, or until maybe the last few years, people really haven't been chatting about them. They're sort of the like, in the background, like quiet guy in the corner situation, but really important here. Can you tell us a little bit about how important this role is for ballot initiatives, for making sure things actually get on the ballot and also protecting elections a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think that since 2020, the focus has been shifted on states and who have powerful secretaries of state. Again, ours is Katie Hobbs. And she again famously said, no, this was a valid election. Here are all my receipts. This was great. So it is the focus is shifted there. And I'm really grateful for that because I think a lot of times people come out and they vote in general elections when they think that they're going to get the senator or the president that they want. And they forget that where all of this happens is at the state level. So the Secretary of State's job is to, as I mentioned, to oversee and to validate all of the signatures if it comes to a petition and a ballot initiative. She or he have the oversight in terms of how to execute the office and make sure that the people who are working for them have clear rules set about how to validate signatures, something that simple. And then when you're talking about elections, all of the election rules, like from being able to decide in the middle of a global pandemic that people should have expanded access
Yeah.
to voting from home, to making sure that we have enough valid polling stations for in-person voting, all of those things follow under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of State. And so it is a critical job being able to make sure that we all maintain our right to vote.
Absolutely. What are some of the, you know, potential blocks and hurdles you guys are preparing for to get this initiative back in front of voters, for
Sure. I think the biggest one at the moment is really just maintaining the messaging. It's really funny how hard you get raked over the coals when you have failed at something or when that's the perception, right?
yeah.
We had this really funny thing happen last week where all of our comms team, our messages, our phones had been ringing off the hook. We couldn't even balance this all out. And then suddenly we didn't get enough signatures and it was eerily quiet. And we were
Mm,
thinking, why don't they want to hear from us? Why don't they want us, some sort of
mm,
a statement? And very quickly, people shifted the narrative. Like, is it because this wasn't popular enough? Is it
Yeah.
because, any number of things? But the reality is, it is just a perception issue. And so we will continue to excite people. We know that we have the momentum on our side. And so we're going to strike right now and make sure that we're able to keep talking about how important
Yeah.
this is. And regardless of who we vote into office in Arizona in the fall, we have to continue to consider this because we will not be Democrat forever, right? Like we know that no matter what happens, the parties are eventually going to change. And we don't want anybody in the future to face what we're facing right now in Arizona either.
yeah.
So the hurdle is certainly just to continue to push that momentum. I think also, we will need to do a better job of making sure that all of our community partners are as invested this time around as well. I don't see a reason why that wouldn't happen, but I do want to make sure that we have all of the support from our communities that we need.
Yeah. What were some of the, I guess, reasons that you might not even know this? Obviously, it just happened last week. You're probably still doing the research to figure out, what needs to happen to really get the over 300,000 signatures, which is a lot, which is like a reason alone of why you couldn't get there, and especially in such a short amount of time. Was there anything else that you noticed was
You know,
hard to get all of those signatures, or was it really just the time frame and the amount needed?
It really was just time. That was our
Yeah.
biggest hurdle. There was some misinformation and disinformation, which you have to expect with this sort of thing. We have some people who are part of the American Family, whatever council who, are very right wing and they would try to spread whatever they could and say that we were allowing for, a baby to be aborted after birth. It's not even possible. But that, right? Right.
Yeah, just
Uh,
aborted through labor. Is
Yes,
that what you mean?
yes,
yeah.
exactly. That's exactly right. Like it doesn't make sense, but these are the talking points that these people
Yeah.
use. And then, of course, they know that that's going to incite an emotional response. And so it's that sort of thing that you can't avoid in this sort of situation. We know that abortion is a sensitive topic for some people. Why in 2022? I don't know. But we know that we're always going to have some of that pushback. But
Hmm.
apart from that, it really was just the time. And again, I don't know if you saw, but Michigan was able to get their
Yeah.
abortion ballot measure and they had 800,000 signatures, but it took
Yeah.
them 2 years in order to
Oh,
reach
okay.
that. And we got 175,000 in 57 days. So
Yeah, that's amazing.
looking at that, yeah, outpacing, I think, really all of the other initiatives was a really big deal. So I feel
Yeah,
confident that we'll be able to get over that.
totally. Totally. I didn't know they were doing it for 2 years. That
Yeah.
makes you guys look that's really impressive what you guys pulled off.
Yeah. It
So,
was
lots to be
great.
proud of.
Well, speaking of getting the message out there and continued, to be on all the waves and all of that, where can people find you guys? Where can people support? And what times in the fall should they look out for other dates and things?
Yeah, so you can always go to our website. It's www.azreproductivefreedom.com. All of our information is there. There's a donate link we will have in a page up as well. And look for those really even before the fall. We have a planning meeting coming this next week. And I think that there will be some announcements coming out of our committee really soon in order to let people know that we're here, that we're not giving up on this battle, that we won't give up until we've restored reproductive freedom in Arizona. So be looking there. And then again in November, make sure that you vote. And then
Hmm.
make sure that you come back and stay in touch with us to determine how to get out and sign the next ballot initiative that we'll be
Yeah.
having for you. And then ultimately, if you really want some great advice about how to assemble a team, you can always email us. It's info@azreproductivefreedom.com. And then one of us will get back to you with an easier outline for how to identify those stakeholders and find some people who
Perfect.
can really write policy and understand how to do this in your state as well.
Thank you. Thank you for all that. Thank you for all of
Of course.
this.
Thank you.
And yeah, you've been super helpful answering all our questions here, but also on our IG Live. So we're super happy to have had you and made this connection. But thank you. And we'll be cheering you guys on and let us know what else we can uplift in this next kind of push for 2024.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me back again. I really appreciate this. It's so helpful for all of us. It really raises our spirits.
Good.
Us
All
too.
right.
Making those moves. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
and
you.
we can't wait to keep working together.
Thank you. Likewise.